Your instructors are Taurus Sussman-Pena, Mehri Druckmann, and Nina Oduro. Ms. Sussman-Pena, who will be your primary instructor, leads the application of IREX's media literacy methodology Learn to Discern in the U.S. and other countries. Ms. Druckmann, who designed and applied Learn to Discern in Ukraine, will explain the methodology's development, why we're susceptible to misinformation, and how misinformation is changing with new technology. Ms. Oduro, a master trainer with IREX, will lead you through exercises to build your media literacy skills.
Starting in 2014, Ukraine fell victim to an increased assault of disinformation and propaganda from the Russian government that continues as of this taping. The campaign is meant to sow confusion, anger, cynicism, and doubt in Ukraine's population with a clear purpose: to better enable the Kremlin to pursue its designs on Ukrainian territory. From the United States, Ukraine's troubles can seem far away. But consider another seemingly unrelated example of information confusion closer to home: the persistence of rumors that the vaccine against measles is dangerous. Measles, a potentially deadly disease that is one of the world's most infectious, was declared eradicated in this country by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the year 2000. The measles vaccine is what made that achievement possible. Thanks, however, to misinformation circulating in pamphlets, books, films, on the web, and via Twitter, some Americans have become convinced that the vaccine is harmful and have chosen not to inoculate their children. The result has been a resurgence of measles, and as of May 2019, it's spread to 26 states. The misinformation originates from various sources, ranging from a shadowy New York-based advocacy organization to some well-known Hollywood celebrities. According to a study published in the Journal of American Public Health Association, though, Russian Twitter trolls have been actively fueling the anti-vaccination debate in the United States by promoting arguments on both sides, once again producing anger and distrust. Here, the purpose seems to be to weaken the U.S. internationally, by turning its people against one another and against our government here at home. The Kremlin isn't the only party playing these dangerous games. Its cyber aggression is just a piece of a much bigger problem that now confronts the entire world: the problem of misinformation. The web of communications technologies that draws us all ever closer together also makes it ever easier for falsehoods, slander, prejudices, and bad ideas to travel much faster and farther than ever before. That's a direct threat to all of us and to democracy, which depends on a well-informed electorate to reach good decisions. I work for IREX, a global non-governmental development and education organization. We are active in over 100 countries on issues such as education, leadership, information, and youth. The global spread of misinformation intersects with everything we do. So in recent years, we've been tackling the problem head on. In this course, some of my colleagues and I are going to share with you our proven methodology for building your resilience to misinformation. We call it Learn to Discern, and we developed it in Ukraine in response to the ongoing crisis there on the front lines of the information war. By the end of this course, we aim to make you more discerning consumers of information, better equipped to judge the validity of the information you receive, and less prone to pass it on if it's suspect. As part of that effort, we want to give you a thorough understanding of the nature and scope of the threat that misinformation poses to us all. Let's take a moment to define terms. Misinformation simply means incorrect or misleading information, while disinformation is information that is false and deliberately created to cause harm. Because it can be hard to identify what the intent was of the person who created a piece of information, it's generally more accurate to use the word misinformation as an umbrella term. While the term fake news has surged in popularity, no one can quite agree on what it means, and it has been used as a slur by politicians to attack reporting that they simply disagree with. It also describes only a small slice of the complex misinformation phenomenon that we live with today. For the sake of accuracy and precision, we will avoid using the term fake news during this course whenever possible. Claire Wardle of First Draft Media, an organization devoted to combating what it calls information disorder, came up with a useful taxonomy of misinformation that identifies 7 types of problematic content. The frame is so helpful that I will quote it in its entirety. Satire or parody. No intention to cause harm, but has the potential to fool. False connection. When headlines, visuals, or captions don't support the content. Misleading content. Misleading use of information to frame an issue or an individual. False context. When genuine content is shared with false contextual information. Imposter content, when genuine news sources are impersonated. Manipulated content, when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive. Fabricated content, new content is 100% false, designed to deceive and do harm. This taxonomy makes it clear that the world of misinformation is complex and nuanced. More often than not, perhaps, true elements mix with false elements to create a confusing and powerful piece of misinformation. 2 additional points that go beyond Wardle's taxonomy are important to call out here. First, hate speech, which can fall into any of these types of content. Hate speech is bigoted content that attacks a person or identity group based on that identity, whether race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or other attributes. Additionally, it's worth defining propaganda, which can contain elements from several of Wardle's categories. Propaganda is crafted with the intent to persuade people of a particular idea or point of view. For example, that a particular identity group is not to be trusted. It's a form of disinformation, which, as I mentioned earlier, involves deliberate falsehoods intended to cause harm. Today, disinformation is used to sow distrust, polarization, and animosity. Different pieces of disinformation from the same source and with the same intent can seem to represent different points of view entirely. For example, during our 2016 elections, Kremlin-driven disinformation in the U.S. advocated perspectives as diverse as those of the Black Lives Matter movement and Donald Trump's presidential campaign. As with the disinformation it spread in the debate about the measles vaccine, Russia's goal was never to convince Americans of either viewpoint, but rather to increase polarization. Even if they don't know its source, many people are aware that false and misleading information is all around us. 50% of Americans surveyed feel that made-up news and information is one of the biggest problems of our time, above problems such as climate change and racism, according to a 2019 study by the Pew Research Center. Almost 40% of U.S. adults say they often see made-up news and information, and another 51% say they sometimes do, so almost all of us are encountering it. Slightly more than half of all adults say that they've shared made-up news stories, though most didn't know it at the time. The presence of misinformation is also taking its toll on our very relationships. Half of adults said that they had avoided a conversation with someone because of concerns that the person would introduce made-up information into the discussion. One confounding fact is that it's very hard to correct misinformation once it's been circulating. Misinformation generally gets more traction than any corrective information that comes afterward. In fact, researchers have identified a phenomenon known as the illusory truth effect. The more times we encounter an idea, the more likely we are to believe it regardless of its validity. Repetition can therefore ingrain false ideas in our head as though they were facts, even if we were initially aware that they're untrue. A study published by MIT scientists looked at the span of slightly more than a decade of Twitter use. The study found that approximately 126,000 rumors were spread by close to 3 million people. In comparing how true news spread as opposed to how false news spread, an alarming pattern emerged. False news reached more people than the truth and spread more quickly, in fact, 6 times as fast. Perhaps the most sobering finding of this study is that it wasn't machines or robots, commonly called bots, spreading this false information, but people. There seems to be something about the human brain that attracts us to false information and makes us want to share it. We all spend a lot of time interacting with media nowadays, but that does not mean that we have the critical skills to analyze and understand it. One well-known study from Stanford University in 2016 demonstrated that youth are easily fooled by misinformation, especially when it comes through social media channels. The study showed that young people from middle school up through college had a hard time even distinguishing advertisements from news articles. They had trouble even identifying where the information came from. And these weaknesses are not only found in youth. Research from New York University found that people over 65 shared 7 times as much misinformation on Facebook as their younger counterparts. This propensity to share misinformation was the same, regardless of their level of education, their political affiliation, or even their level of partisanship. While the study found that the likelihood of sharing false information on Facebook overall was still rare, it's worth noting the potential harm. Adults in this age range vote in larger numbers than any other adults. It's easy to think of people in our lives who would benefit from improving their skills discerning false information from true, but the fact of the matter is we all need it, every one of us. I'm going to share a personal example. I recently received a text from my teenage daughter during a school lockdown. Lockdown drills are an unfortunate part of living in 21st century United States, and this, even more unfortunately, was not a drill, but a real lockdown. Stuck in the library with her peers and without any information as to what was happening from the teachers or the staff, my daughter did what everyone does these days. She turned to her cell phone for answers. A friend sent her a text that seemed to provide a rather frightening piece of insight, and my daughter forwarded the text to me. The forwarded text had a large title, WTF. A screenshot from the local Fox News station was underneath with the headline, Prince George's County Police step up presence at schools following. My eyes jumped around the words, quickly landing on the phrase, hint at a shooting attack. As my heart began to pound, I paused for a moment, looked up from the phone, and realized that I was starting to panic. I took a breath, and when I looked back at the screen, my eyes landed on the date, October 2nd, 2016, over 2 years earlier. At about the same time, my daughter texted me to say, ignore that, just realized it's from 2016. Under tense circumstances, when we perceive that we or our loved ones are in danger, the body's stress responses kick in, readying us to function in a life-threatening situation. The part of the brain that activates this response, the amygdala, can't tell the difference between a lion that might attack us and a scary text. The physiological response to both is the same. We narrow our focus to concentrate on survival. As we do this, however, the rational processes of the brain become more limited. This makes it easier for us to miss critical details that would help us identify the inaccuracy or even falseness of information. In my own experience, my fear for my daughter's safety and the words, a shooting attack, were enough to initially shut down my critical appraisal of the text. And this happened even though I train other people on how to deal with exactly this type of information. The lesson here is that no one is exempt from the weaknesses that are hardwired into us as human beings. What's the solution to the misinformation problem? Governments and tech platforms certainly have a role to play in stemming the tide of misinformation. But IREX believes that they can't do it alone. We all need to take responsibility for combating this threat by becoming more information literate, and that includes you. To help you start building your media literacy muscles, my colleague Nina Oduro, a master trainer at IREX, will take you through an exercise designed to raise your awareness of how your media environment shapes your perceptions.
Have you ever thought about how much time you spend on various types of media? Do you know how much time you spend reading the paper, whether in print or online, watching TV, or on social media? Think about the other content you consume and the programs and platforms that you prefer, whether news sites, streaming entertainment programs, music, sports, or something else. And when you make use of them throughout the morning, afternoon, and evening of a typical day. Take a moment and take out a piece of paper and a pen, or open the Notes app on your phone. Or you can just think through the exercise. List all of the media that you use or take in during your daily life and when. For example, maybe you watch the Today Show in the morning on the TV and listen to a podcast on the way to work on a bus. Once you get to work, you might check email. If a Facebook notification pops up, do you click on it? Do you get sucked into the social media platform for longer than you intended? What about message apps? Do you text with friends using Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or your phone's message app? Be sure to consider streaming platforms like the great courses, Netflix, or something else, or web platforms for music such as Spotify or Pandora. The categories don't really matter. The important thing is to try to create a detailed portrait of a typical day, not just what you consume, but also how much time you spend doing it. Now, think about the devices you use regularly to consume the media you prefer. This includes cell phones, computers, tablets, TV. But don't limit yourself to digital devices. You might also use books, magazines, the car radio. They all compete for your attention and shape your ideas. Do you use any of these tools simultaneously, like texting while watching TV? Now, based on what you have thought through, try to add up the total number of hours you spend on media each day. What percentage of your waking hours do you spend using different types of media? Does the result surprise you? If media use fills up more of your day than you realize, you're not alone. Information is everywhere, all around us. We are like fish swimming in an ocean of information. It shapes almost every aspect of your experience, even when you're not aware of it. Let's consider some global statistics that illustrate the information-saturated world we live in today. Every minute of the day, people around the world sent about 13 million text messages. They conduct close to 4 million Google searches. About 600 users publish edits in Wikipedia. Facebook's users, who number over 2 billion, generate over 4 million likes. We interact with information constantly. And we are producing it constantly. The total current output of data globally is roughly 2.5 quintillion bytes a day, the equivalent of 250,000 Libraries of Congress. That's every single day. In fact, 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the last 2 years. As of 2019, 4.4 billion people had access to the internet. That's 57% of the inhabitants of the Earth, more than half. More important than that is that it was an 11% increase from the year before. If you think about that rate of increase, you can see that within about a decade, much of the whole world will be coming online, with the exception of the most severely impoverished or marginalized groups. Consider the challenge you face as an individual in navigating and assessing all that information. Now, let's look at our own media consumption habits in light of those of other Americans. Kindergartners in the United States are exposed to an average of 70 media messages every day. Teens spend at least 9 hours a day interacting with media, and adults spend an average of 11 hours per day. In other words, we're spending most of our waking hours in front of screens and other information sources interacting with media. If you translate such figures into the amount of information you consume over a lifetime, you might find the results alarming. For example, the average American over a lifetime will spend 7 years and 8 months watching TV. If you're close to the average, you will also spend an average of 5 years and 4 months interacting with social media. This is particularly striking when compared to the average of 3 years and 5 months you will spend eating and drinking, or sadly, the average of 1 year and 3 months you will spend socializing face-to-face with other people over the course of your lifetime. Is that the life you want? How you choose to spend your time is up to you. But when you consider how pervasive media are in your daily life, you can't help but realize that they shape your perspective and define many of the topics you focus on. Now ask yourself, how much trust are you placing in the sources of information you use? How much do you really know about the entities that produce the content you are consuming? The sheer quantity of information you're surrounded with can affect your ability to discern its quality. And that's important, not just because you rely on the information to make decisions, but because if you're like most people, you often share it with others. Think about it. Are you on social media? If so, did you share or like anything within the last couple of days? Did you share or like something about politics or other important policy-related issues? Are you sure what you shared is accurate? Do you verify or double-check the information before you shared? Even if you aren't an active social media user, you still may be sharing information through email or other means. No one is only a consumer of information anymore. In fact, this is the first time in history that we, as individuals, have had such remarkable access to information and such power to produce and disseminate. But with great power comes great responsibility. We have not yet developed the skills to handle our newfound power responsibly. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Nina. Many of the figures that Nina cited were for American media consumption. But an important feature of the age of digital information is that information doesn't stop at borders, nor does misinformation. That's a big reason why it's so important to take the problem of misinformation seriously and to adopt habits that limit its spread. There's more at stake than just reducing the number of false rumors that are circulating about celebrities or the benefits of some dietary supplement. Misinformation can sway public opinion, endanger public health, influence elections, or even spark international conflict. IREX developed its Learn to Discern methodology for building resilience to misinformation from our decades of experience in Ukraine. My colleague Mehri Druckman leads the design and implementation of this methodology there. She will describe IREX's work in Ukraine, the damage that misinformation has done there, and how IREX has been employing Learn to Discern to combat it.
IREX works in Ukraine in a variety of areas, building a more technologically modern, community-focused library system, building dialogue and community cohesion across polarized groups, and strengthening the work of educators. Our longest-running program has been going since 2002. We have been helping independent media to build stronger journalism and business skills, as well as form lasting relationships with US-based news media. And we observed as a dangerous new trend arose. In late 2013, Ukrainians began to widely protest the government's decision to suspend progress towards an association agreement with the European Union, in what became known as Euromaidan Revolution. After Ukrainians' pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych fled the country, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, a southern peninsula of Ukraine. In pursuit of that annexation, Russia employed a strategy that became known as hybrid warfare, the use of non-military means such as misinformation in support of military aggression. More specifically, Russia deployed abundant, compelling messaging to stir up fear amongst the residents of Crimea that they were becoming second-class citizens. Russia then proceeded to annex the peninsula in 2014 and also to occupy parts of Ukraine's eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Since that time, all Ukrainians have lived in a propaganda-filled environment where half-truth and alternative facts play on fears, confusion, national identities, and patriotic feelings. Russia's tactics, according to Ben Nemo of the Institute for Statecraft in London, created uncertainty, confusion, and ultimately a doubt whether any source can be trusted without personal experience. The disinformation problem has been exacerbated by structural weakness in Ukraine's media sector. Media ownership drives editorial policies, and major channels are owned by oligarchs and political elites with business ties in Russia. As a result of these factors, Ukrainians have remained poorly informed and confused about crucial governance reforms. Media consumption and its influence on Ukrainians remain high, but cross-checking news sources to verify them, the most basic form of media literacy, is not standard behavior. About half of the population never cross-checks the news they consume. Not surprisingly, many Ukrainians are becoming increasingly cynical and apathetic about the country's future, with barely 1 in 4 saying they trust the media. The Ukrainian government has recognized the problem. It has expelled dozens of Russian journalists, and it revoked the accreditation of over 100 media outlets between 2014 and 2015. It also banned some Russian channels from TV cable packages and blocked Russian social media and internet resources in 2017. Nevertheless, the government's mitigation attempts have focused largely on supply-side disciplinary measures. It was in this context that IREX designed and implemented Learn to Discern as the grassroots response to the problem of manipulative information. We believe that it is an essential companion to supply-side solutions, such as alternative content production and support of independent, ethical, and truthful journalism. Learn to Discern helps people more effectively separate facts from fiction and recognize manipulation and bias, as well as provides them with techniques to build emotional resilience to the sway of misinformation. IREX's pilot Learn to Discern program was funded by the Canadian government between 2015 and 2016 and conducted in partnership with local organizations, Academy of Ukrainian Press and Stop Fake. Through intense skill-building seminars, it reached more than 15,000 adults of all ages and professional backgrounds. It also reached more than 90,000 people indirectly. Direct participants shared what they learned with family, co-workers, and peers. Accompanying public service announcements and billboard messages, alerting Ukrainian citizens to the danger of misinformation reached an estimated 2.5 million people. In 2018 and 2019, IREX and Ukrainian Ministry of Education and Science worked with teachers in 50 schools across Ukraine to integrate media literacy lessons into existing courses on history, art, culture, and Ukrainian language and literature. By 2021, techniques from Learn to Discern will be taught to 40,000 students across every region of Ukraine. Scientifically rigorous evaluation of our work, both with adults and in schools, have found that people who had learned to discern skills and techniques were more likely to detect hate speech, better at identifying fake news stories, better able to differentiate between facts and opinions, more knowledgeable about the news media industry, equipped with a stronger sense of personal responsibility and accountability for the information they consume. That is why we are confident that the skills, techniques, and tools we're going to teach you in this course are effective and important for you to learn.
Thanks, Mehri. In the same way that misinformation has destabilized Ukraine and has persuaded some Americans to leave their children vulnerable to the ravages of measles, it can travel quickly through communities that don't have strong enough protections in place, causing very real-world harm. Unfortunately, there is nothing as straightforward as a vaccine to protect people from the dangers of misinformation. It takes more than one simple action. It takes awareness, focus, and skill building. But luckily, it is possible to build up resilience to the dangers of misinformation. My colleagues and I look forward to showing you how.